it's interesting now with everything that's happening with the Houthis, because at the time we were trying to get Saleh to focus on Al-Qaeda, and Saleh was like, the Houthis are the real SOBs. You guys need to be worried about the Houthis. And we were like, nah, the Houthis aren't that big of a deal. Now it's like, yeah. But I really enjoyed my time in Yemen because we had basically a lot of autonomy. I mean, we were living in the middle of the city in a house. Like there was still, you were there. There's still good freedom of movement. It was still dangerous, so it was kind of exciting. There was definitely bad guys there.
I love that. All the places I worked, I loved working in Yemen.
Same here. I think Sana'a is a beautiful city, and you can go like wander around the old city, like all the history there. Mm-hmm. And Yemenis are really, at the time, were really friendly. I think that's probably changed with the war.
It was such an interesting dynamic there for me because, and maybe this was happening in other places, but Yemen was just different. But you had the regular operations that were going on everywhere, but then also you had all the other foreign intel agencies that we're not friends with that are all there, and everybody's spying on each other, and you're trying to do the regular mission, and you're also doing all this other stuff. You know, you get the Chinese there, you got the Russians there, you got the Iranians there, everybody is in Yemen.
Yeah.
But it's all under the radar.
Yep.
But everybody knows, and it's just it makes it really it just makes life very interesting.
Yeah, it was a really exciting place to be. I thought, especially living in Sana'a, you go move around the city, and we're looking for bad guys. But like you said, like the Russians were there looking at us, the Chinese were there.
Everybody. I mean, did you ever eat at that sushi restaurant?
I know. Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
There could only be one, I'm sure.
And the guy the owner got killed outside of his own, stabbed to death.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if we crossed paths over there. Probably not, but. Yeah, those were good times.
Yeah.
In Yemen.
Really good times.
So what were you doing there?
So we were training the Yemeni Special Operations Forces, and then also we were working just collecting intel on the Al-Qaeda, looking for AQ and the AP. So because I was Yemen qualified, that was like my night job was to augment that. And so the guys at station or whatever would give us requirements, and we had really good access to the population because we were working with the Yemeni Special Forces. Like I was hanging out with Saleh's nephew, with the president's nephew, and they knew that we were there to try and track down some of those guys. And there were some cat and mouse games being played with the Saleh regime because they were trying to basically, like Saleh said, dance on the heads of snakes, like keep all the different militias happy. So he was trying to feed us low value AQ targets to keep us happy because we were funding his entire government. But at the same time, he had like the back and forth going on with the Houthis, and he was trying to bribe off different tribes to not join the Houthis. So we were trying to map out all those dynamics, which was super interesting, I thought, especially just the role that the tribes play there and how much power the tribes have inside Yemen. It was like, I mean, I had done a little bit of that in Anbar in Iraq, and those tribes out there were powerful and had influence, but like the tribal dynamic in Yemen and how Saleh patched all that together, I thought was pretty amazing. So just trying to navigate all those dynamics and map them out was really cool.
Yeah. Back to DC with Shannon.
Yeah.
I mean, with both of you guys in a unit like that, how does the discussion of kids get approached?
Oh, it just happened.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's kind of funny because I just living the life I lived. I was just like, I'm probably never going to have kids. Mm-hmm. And that was just like, for me, I was like, okay, well, it's fine. I'll just go to war for my entire life. That was my dumb mentality. And then I met Shannon, and Shannon was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, we're going to have kids. And I was like, actually, that does make a lot more sense. I was like, that does. You're probably right, and so we got pregnant really pretty early on, like right after Shannon, right after we were married. Our first son was on the way. And then, right after that, we had started, right when we first started talking about having a second kid, Shannon's like, well, I'm pregnant. It's just like, because, I mean, I'm 3 years older than she was. So we knew we were kind of on a tight timeline to have kids. Yeah.
And you guys planned on staying in with kids?
We did. I mean, that was definitely, if we had any friction point in our marriage, I mean, that was definitely it. I mean, Shannon really understood who I was. And as I was approaching retirement, I mean, I had my next career mapped out. I knew I was going to go go work in Ground Branch, work at the CIA, because I'd already worked for those guys and I'd already been to the farm. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to just basically cross deck right over there, get my military pension retirement, start a second career. The way I sold it to Shannon was that I'd only do Ground Branch for a little bit and then I'd go do traditional case officer stuff. And she had worked around the agency a bunch, and you can have a decent life because there's a lot of married couples in the agency that make that work. So that was my sales pitch. But, Shannon was like, at some point we're going to have to say that we've done enough, like I think when we hit the 20-year mark, I think we should call it good. And I was like, I'm not good after 20 years. Like I want to keep going. Like there's more. And so that was definitely our one, piece of marital friction there was when I said, hey, I'm going to retire on a Friday and swear in at the CIA on a Monday.
Wow.
Yeah. So
wow.
She was supportive. I mean, she was like, I get it. This is who you are, but you've really got to figure out who you are past all this. And to me, that was like white noise. Anytime people talked about like transitioning out of the military or, not deploying for a living, getting shot at, I was just like, yeah, you must be talking about somebody else because I'm not going to do that. So that was our plan. That was my plan anyways. Shannon was, much more realistic. And after we had kids, she was like, I don't want to deploy. I don't want to go overseas and deploy and be away from my kids, but I still want to serve. On her last deployment to Afghanistan with NSW, she was part of the team where Commander Joe Price killed himself in Afghanistan. And she, because Shannon was always kind of a forward thinker, she was like, it doesn't make sense that this guy killed himself. Like he's a well-respected, like big, strong Navy SEAL. Like, why did he kill himself? And so she really went down the rabbit hole of like the mental health crisis. And she was talking about the mental health crisis like before I had ever heard anybody talk about it. And she was like, I want to do something about that. And so she got her bachelor's and her master's in psychology. She had gotten accepted into a Navy program to get a PhD and to become an actual therapist. And she wanted to work on the mental health crisis that we're having right now. But catch-22, when the Navy picks up people for those programs, it's a commissioning program. So they hold you to accession standards as if you just came off the street, as opposed to retention standards. Retention standards have some flexibility in the medical side because, like, if you're fit enough, if you have a record of good service, like they'll keep you in the military. If you're a kid just coming off the street, they want to make sure they're going to get their money's worth. So the medical standards are actually a little bit higher. Shannon had cancer when I was in Iraq. When I was in Iraq the last time. She had thyroid cancer. She had it cut out, returned to duty. She didn't even tell me about it till after it was cut out. She's like sent me a text of like this stitch across her throat. She's like, I had a little bit of cancer cut out. I'm like, what? Like, do I need to come home? Like, what's wrong? She's like, nah, I took it out. It's fine. Cancer-free, returned to duty. She's back to working out and leading her sailors up there at the NSA. And she applies for this program. They're like, well, you previously had cancer. So you're in, even though she was accepted academically to the program, they shot her down and they wouldn't let her commission and go to the psych program. So that's how she ended up going on her fifth and final deployment. So she was looking responsibly and looking for an off ramp from the deployment lifestyle.
Before we move into her deployment, I want to talk to you about moving from the unit that you were in. You retire from that.
Yeah.
Cross deck over to CIA as a ground branch PMCO. Mm-hmm. What was your impression of the agency after coming from the previous unit?
I think I had a pretty good picture because I'd worked around the agency so much, just doing the things I did in Special Forces and then in the unit. And I had been to the farm already, mm-hmm. So I had been deeply immersed in the agency while I was there. I have a lot of, like, the CIA treats its people really well. Like the military are kind of a number almost all the time, but the agency, they treat their people. I think they realize they're going to invest a lot in folks, and they have a lot of talented people, and they do treat them very, very well. Obviously, the agency's it's a little bit softer than the military, a little bit more touchy-feely, a little bit more corporate HR. So in processing at the big agency, it's sort of like, I don't know, dealing with the big Army, the big Navy. You're kind of like, all right, well, this is sort of bureaucratic and a little bit more touchy-feely. But I had worked enough with Ground Branch to know that was exactly where I wanted to be, because that's, Those are the guys that do covert action. Like those are the dudes that are actually doing the most dangerous things that the agency does. And so I knew that's where I wanted to be. And so Ground Branch is tiny within the agency, but you go there and it's like, this is where every legendary dude goes to continue their career after they already had a legendary career. So like I go in there and, there's guys that were, fighting back in the 80s and the 90s and covert dirty wars. There's still some old Vietnam veterans running around that are still there doing something at some capacity. The guy that ran our, shooting package, which was part of the selection, was a Mogadishu guy. I mean, like it's just, you walk in there and it's just like, holy crap, man. Like I've made it and I'm around absolute legends.
You were more impressed
community.
with Ground Branch at CIA than you were with the previous unit.
It's hard to say in terms of like intelligence and aptitude. The previous unit that I was coming from, that unit recruits from such a small pool of special operators, and they're looking for such a unique thing that you get some really, really smart people there and just really unique. And then Ground Branch is bringing in a lot of the smart guys as well. And a lot of people that gravitate more towards the intel side. But because Ground Branch's mission had been so kinetic, especially in Afghanistan and Iraq, they had brought in a ton of just hard men who love to fight. Like guys who literally, like, these are the dudes who didn't get enough action in Delta, SEAL Team 6, the rest of the flavor of special operations, probably had a full career there, or they left because they weren't getting enough action. And they wanted to go to a place where they could literally do nothing else but focus, especially on the contractor were going to be contractors. I mean, they were there specifically to run indigenous forces and to get into gunfights and to kill bad dudes. So it wasn't as specialized as what I had in my previous unit. But to me, it was just like, this is where the guys who are 100% going to run towards the sound of the guns. Everywhere I'd been in the military, guys would run towards the sound of the guns. But here you had guys that had already had a full career somewhere else that were like, yeah, I know I'm in my mid 40s, but I'm still here to get it on, up until they're 60 or so.
Yeah.